Welcome everybody. This is the Microsoft 365 Platform Community Call. It is November 22nd, 2022. It is the Thanksgiving week, so we'll probably not have as many people joining from US, but for the rest of the world, this is quite normal week. Now, today we'll go through again the typical slides on what are the assets available for you to get started on the Microsoft 365 platform development and all of the different things which are available for you to take advantage for free from Microsoft side. We'll also go through the latest news across Microsoft 365 blogs and the latest updates on the Microsoft Teams and documentation side. Then we'll have the group picture with Together mode. And then we go to the actual stars of the day, which are Aisha Bass talking about the build your first notification bot in C# for Microsoft Teams with Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio. So a really cool thing there. Bill Bear is going to talk about what's new for Microsoft Search usage reports. And then I'm going to show how to build a SharePoint framework powered multi-tab solution using Microsoft Teams Toolkit as well. So cool demos today, and we'll have basically 15 minutes for all of those demo sections. Before we go there, let's go to typical slides and latest news, what's happening. First of all, we have 2 different YouTube channels available for you to take advantage. We are looking into combining them in the future, so making it a bit more easier to you to find what's relevant for you. We have a lot of open source assets available from GitHub, but as it might be a bit difficult to find the relevant sample for you, we actually have specific sample galleries. So from AKMS M365 samples, you will find all of the samples from Microsoft or from community related on Microsoft Drive, Microsoft Teams, SharePoint Framework, Power Platform, and so on. So making it super easy to consume from one centralized location. And from there, you can then access or you will be redirected to the GitHub, so you can actually download the sample from there. And if you're wondering that there's too many URLs to remember, luckily there's actually only one, which is AKMS M365/community. So that's the easiest way to actually find all of these assets and things which are available for you to take advantage. We do have quite a few different community calls. This Tuesday community call is happening every single Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific time. We have Microsoft presenters in here, so program managers, cloud advocates, engineers doing live demos on this call. Now, for the upcoming holiday, we're looking into potentially transforming, we will be transforming this Tuesday call to be more like a coffee together with Microsoft. So we will keep on having the call happening, but we'll probably not have that many demos on the latter part of December on this call because we're expecting a lot of Microsoft people to take time off. I don't have any vacation times anyway because I use my vacation time on summertime because I'm based in Europe and it's dark and there's nothing to do right now in here. So I will be on this call every single Tuesday. At least to have a discussion with you. Even though we wouldn't have a live demos, we can have Q&A on during the holiday season. Now, we also have a lot of other calls as well. So we have Microsoft Identity Platform call, Office Settings call, Power Platform call happening every single month. And then we have our Thursday 7 a.m. Pacific time series, which is either the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform community call or Viva Connection and SharePoint Framework call. So a lot of stuff is happening. You can, of course, download all of or you can view the recordings afterwards, so you don't have to be in all of these calls. Always don't feel bad about, of course, we have our life and work and other things as well, which we need to worry. If you're looking into downloading the invites to these calls, please go on to AKMS M365/calls, from where you can find all of the different calls which are available. So it's a quick note, call out, the adaptive cards call will be suspended or will be actually closed, and that will merge to the Tuesday call, as so all of the adaptive card news and updates will be in this Tuesday call in the future as well. So we're kind of looking into consolidating some of these calls also in the future. We'll also give you a easy access to training material and training environment. So you should be, of course, subscribed to the Microsoft 365 developer program. You will get a free E5 tenant, which will renew automatically in every single 90 days, as long as you use it for developer purposes. So we're basically detecting, are you using it for development or are you using that for something else? And if it's for development, it's going to renew automatically. And then we are providing you a lot of free training material around Microsoft 365 platform from AKMS M365 Dev Learn, and there's like 8 modules of training material available. So if you have some free time during holiday season, that is a great asset and great location to have a look on what you can do, for example, with Microsoft Graph or Microsoft Teams or Microsoft Viva and so on. Now, we also have 2 different podcast and video blog shows. So we have the Microsoft 365 Developer Podcast hosted by Jeremy Fake and Paul Schaffelin. And then we have the Microsoft 365 PMP Weekly hosted by yours truly and Waldeck Mastercards. And both of these always have visitors. We're going to talk about the latest status around Microsoft 365 development and specifically focusing, for example, bot development or PM work in Microsoft, or being an MVP or adaption and whatever is that particular week's topic. We also mentioned already our centralized Microsoft 365 sample gallery. Right now in there, we do have more than 1,300 samples available across different areas of Microsoft 365, including Power Platform. So there's a lot of material available. Don't start from scratch. Try to find a location or a sample which you can use as a starting point, and then adjust that based on your business needs. Now, quickly watching on the attendance. Unfortunately, David Warner, well, not unfortunately, but he's on vacation, so he's not joining on going through this slide. So he's luckily not joining on this one. We did agree that I will cover the slide if he's not on the call. So as you're looking into finding that sample, you might be wondering that, okay, how would I actually use the sample then? How would I download the sample from GitHub, or how would I get started on contributing with my samples? And we got you actually covered. So we have our Sharing is Caring initiative as AKMS/sharing is caring, where we have different sessions and different events which are not recorded, so they are a safe place to join to train to different specific topics. And we have different events and different opportunities available. So for example, we have the Power Platform Samples Contributor event happening on November 28th, which is actually close to a week from now. So next week, there's going to be an event related on what if you would be looking into building Power Platform samples and how would you contribute those for others in a community. Related on next week, we also have our but another execution of App Camp workshop, which is happening on November 29th at 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific time. I understand that for those people who are attending on this call, that might be a bit of a problematic time zone, but we're looking into targeting also the Asia Pacific people with this material. You can in general access the App Camp workshop material from AKMS/app-camp, where you're actually going to learn how to extend existing applications for Microsoft Teams and how can you build your ISV offerings for Microsoft Teams. So really cool material as well. Now, related on the news, and there was actually quite a lot of happening on the news area. So last week we had 4 different blog posts from the developer blogs outside around the security, governance, and privacy built into Microsoft Graph Data Connect, and that really talks about the different options of obfuscating any privacy data as you're exporting data from the Microsoft 365 using the Microsoft Data Connect capabilities. There was an app compliance automation tool announcement, which is now in public preview and which makes it easier for you to double check the compliance within the app level within the tenant. So really cool tool as well. And 3Cons is going to actually join on December 13th, if I remember correctly, on this call to showcase that tool in practice. Gary also had a really nice hands-on lab or tutorial around building a stock update notification bot using C# and Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio. He did show actually this relatively recently in this call as well. So that's more a written tutorial on going through those steps. And then we have the announcement of general availability of SharePoint Framework 1.16, which enables the SharePoint Framework to be used also not only in SharePoint, of course, but also in Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Viva, Outlook, and Office 365 app, also known as Office.com. On other areas, just to call out, on the Microsoft Teams, I really like the fact that we have the sign language view now available in Microsoft Teams. That's really cool from D&I, diversity and inclusiveness perspective. So really great investments in there. And just today, we released a blog post related on most used SharePoint Framework solutions in the store within October 2022. So a lot of news announcements still happening within this week. Now, on the Microsoft Teams platform documentation side, Vajid is available to cover through what's the latest in there.
Thanks, Vatsal. Hello, everyone. I'll walk you through the Teams platform updates. Let's start with the first one. So Adaptive Card in Teams now support overflow menu. You can populate an overflow menu for all the secondary actions in Adaptive Card. An overflow menu in an Adaptive Card can be added to actions or action sets. Second, we released the App Manifest version 1.15, which now supports anonymized payload field in message extension, and which enabled our next feature update which is zero link install. So zero install link unfurling helps you unfurl preview for your shared links even before a user discovered or install your app in Teams. You can anonymously unfurl the card with a new invoke request or create a pre-authenticated adaptive card preview for the users before they install or authenticate your app. So these were the platform updates. If you have any feedback or suggestion, please post it on aka.ms Teams platform feedback. The links are available in the footer. So you could also follow us on Twitter and configure the RSS feed to get the regular platform updates. Thank you. Back to you, Faisal.
Excellent. Thank you, Wajid, on that one. And then we are right on the schedule. Before we go to the actual stars of today with Aisha and Bill Bear, let's do a together mode picture. So those who are willing will grab a GIF animation out of the together mode situation. So looking good. Can we do a wave? Let's try start from Ralph. If you're Ralph, start from the left, and then we do a wave. No, just kidding. Just kidding. We're not recording yet. We have 50 seats in a room. Let me put the recording on so we can actually get a nice GIF animation out of this. A lot of people joining. This is really, really cool. Let's do some hand waving, everybody. We'll grab a GIF animation out of that. Thanks, everybody, for joining. We'll share this in the social media after the call as well, and as part of call recording. And there's big hands on the back row. Excellent. Thanks, everybody. Great picture. And thanks for joining on that. Good. And then we'll go to the actual stars of the day, who are Aisha Bass and Bill Bear. And I'll talk about a few things after those great demos. But Aisha, let's start with you.
Awesome. Let me share my screen really quickly. Can you hear me well?
All good. And we can see the slides. Take it away.
Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Aisha Bash. I only have 15 minutes, so I'll try to make it a quick intro, and then we will jump into building apps with Teams Toolkit. I'm a senior cloud advocate at Microsoft. I'm based in Dubai, and I love building solutions across Microsoft Cloud using Graph, Teams, and Azure. If you are interested in learning more what sort of content I'm working on or the solutions, you can follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or GitHub. You can also check out the solutions there. Today, we have a specific agenda for building a solution using Teams Toolkit. First, I'll just show you what Teams Toolkit looks like on Visual Studio, and then we will create a notification bot using Visual Studio, Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio. We will run the bot on Teams, and then I'll quickly walk you through how code piece work, and then I'll leave you with a couple of resources, and then we will jump into the next presentation. Okay, so I think next is just jumping into the demo. Let me bring Visual Studio. First off, if you go to Visual Studio installer, you will have to install web development package, and you will have to check Teams development individual component to make sure that you have Teams toolkit is coming with the web development package. When you install Teams toolkit, whenever you want to create a new project, let's say that we are creating a new project right now. When you type Teams, you will have to see Microsoft Teams app as one of the project template options. I'll select this, and meanwhile, we're actually creating a notification bot. I'll just keep the name as it is, but you can change the name, you can change the location, and you can also change the solution name. We can create this. When you're creating a Teams app, there are a couple of options available. First one is notification bot, which is for the scenarios where you want to get information from APIs, or I think the basic one I can think of is the weather API. For example, you want to receive notification every morning at 9 a.m. How is the weather like today in your own location? You can use notification bot to get this information from different APIs. There are different trigger types. The trigger can be HTTP trigger. You can use ASP.NET Core, Web API, or Azure Functions to do that. There's also different version of receiving that notification, either when there is information coming from the API, so you will send that notification information to the user, or you can set a timer, as I mentioned in the weather bot. Every morning at 9 a.m., you will get this information so that you will use the timer. You can also build both of them in one single bot by using notification bot, HTTP, and timer trigger. You can also go for a comment bot. Today we will focus on notification bot. I will quickly summarize you how the rest of them works. Comment bot is a great scenario if you have question and answer type of app. You can build different types of questions and answers. I think comment bot goes really great when it with Cognitive Services Q&A Maker API. You can actually convert your website Q&A, or if you have an Excel sheet with questions and answers, you can just use the Cognitive Services API and call the API from comment bot, and it will drive all of the questions and answers through the comment bot on Teams. Tab is basically the surface we use. It works like a web application, but it runs on Microsoft Teams. If you have, if you want to, let's say, run group tasks, or if you want to build a dashboard inside a team channel, I think Tab is a great option, great surface for us to check internally on Teams. And messaging extension is the extensions for the if you want to compose a message by using adaptive cards, for example. Messaging extensions are great actions. You can directly compose all of the cards inside the messaging extension, inside the message, and then you can send the message directly in the chat. There are different ways you can directly send the adaptive cards. You can either use search in the messaging extension, or you can use the chat message functionality. Today we will focus on notification bot, and for today's scenario I will use ASP.NET Core Web API, but if you're more comfortable with Azure Functions, you can just go with Azure Functions option, and you can try that locally as well. Let's create this, and then first we will try to run the app, and I will show you how it works in on Teams. And after that, I will just walk you through the project and the code piece. First off, when I created the project, as you see on the right side, we have the project, we have the solution itself, and it comes with a really nice text file. That means that when you are trying this for the first time, you will have some guidance even without this presentation. So first off, to run this project, we will need ngrok, some sort of tunneling. This functionality, I should start by saying that Teams Toolkit is available in both Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. In this sample, we are using Visual Studio and .NET. For the Visual Studio Code, Teams Toolkit doesn't require ngrok. For Visual Studio version, we still need a tunneling in the background to run the project. I will start by just running ngrok. I have already ngrok over here opened. I install it. If you didn't install it yet, you can just use this link to go ahead and install it. I need to, as you see in the second step, I need to run ngrok HTTP 5130. I'll copy this and paste it in my ngrok, and I'll run it on the different screen. What? Just 1 second. I'll have to make sure that. Oh, okay. I have to make sure that it's actually open. Wait. I need to rerun ngrok. Apologies for repeating the same step. I don't know why, but I copied the run piece as well. I think I'm just rushing because I have 15 minutes. That's all fine. Okay, ngrok is over here. I'll just copy paste ngrok HTTP 5130. And I'll bring this back over here. The second step for us is to right click to the project and prepare Teams app dependencies. I'll right click to my project, and then I will go to Teams Toolkit and click on Prepare Teams App Dependencies. This will automatically create some of the dependencies for us. And if you don't have M365 developer program account, this is actually the test tenant you can get freely from the developer program. I'm just using the test tenant we created from Microsoft 365 Developer Program. If you have all the permissions in your company account or work or school account, you're fine. You can just use your own account. But if you don't have all the permissions or setup for testing Teams apps, I highly recommend you to go ahead and create a free testing tenant in the developer program. This one is the one I created, and I'm going to use this account for creating all the dependencies. I click continue, and you can actually check what sort of things Teams Toolkit is running in the background. For example, it's creating bot code provider. It is also generating AAD app for Teams bot. It is creating app manifest behind the scenes. So we don't have to go ahead and create app manifest, or we don't have to register an app in Active Directory. It's all done by the Teams Toolkit when we prepare all of the dependencies. Okay, so we're fine. We just completed all of the dependencies, and now it's time to press F5 or just go ahead and click on the green button and run the project. Let's quickly run the project. And the next step will be triggering the bot just to get a response back. And we will use PowerShell for that. In the example, it's guiding us how to run the query and then get the notification in the bot. Let's see our bot on Microsoft Teams first, and then we will invoke web request in the API/notification and hopefully get a response back from the bot. Okay, so now my app should be running. Once it's ready, it will pop up a browser. Yep. And I will have to log into Microsoft Teams. It already have a login hint, so I don't have to do that. It will log into Microsoft Teams for me and then pop up my notification bot app. Okay, so our app is ready. I will just click add, and this will bring me a private chat with bot and myself. That means that our bot will be ready to test and debug. And once we have our bot ready, the next step is definitely triggering the API so that bot will bring us something. It will show us something. So for that, as you remember, in Visual Studio Code, it was suggesting us to use PowerShell to invoke web request. I have a PowerShell open over here. I will just copy paste this and see if we will get any notification on Teams. Okay, yeah, we got the notification. We first have adaptive card with a title, company information, description, and a button, which guides us to adaptivecards.io. That means that whenever there is whenever we trigger an API, we can actually get the data and we can show the data with an adaptive card, which will make it look prettier. Let's quickly check the code how this thing works. As you see here, we are triggering API/notification. That means that we must have a controller over here, notification controller.cs. So whenever we are calling API/notification, that means that we are actually reading the adaptive card file path, which is under resources. It's the adaptive card called notification default.json. It's under here. As you see, we have a default adaptive card with a text block, for title. We have text block for app name and description. And finally, we have a button with action open URL. You can create your own adaptive card by just going to adaptivecards.io. There's a designer there. There's a designer you can use to design your own adaptive card, how you want to make it look and feel by dragging and dropping. And then at the end, it will generate you a JSON file. Let's get back to notification controller really quickly. So here is the place, whenever we get an invoke in the API/notification, we go to post async and we start reading the adaptive card template over here. As you can see, adaptive card file path we read on top. And after that, we are basically sending the adaptive card by just generating a new adaptive card. We are filling the information over here. That means that the adaptive card you create is reusable. You can just reuse the same adaptive card to send different messages to the end user, or you can use different ones for different purposes. And finally, at the end, we just send adaptive card and we show the adaptive card on screen as a message. You can totally change the post. Basically, you can change the response of the bot. You don't have to send adaptive card. You can do different things. In here, we're just showing you how basically you can call an API and get a response from bot. There are different scenarios you can try out. And one of the great examples Uvesa mentioned at the beginning of this call is the stock bot notification scenario that my colleague Gary prepared. It's available in the devlogs. I highly recommend you to go ahead and check out if you're looking for a tutorial type of learning. And let me quickly wrap up by sharing a couple of resources in general about Teams Toolkit. We have a documentation about Teams Toolkit overview, installation guidelines, and how you can create your very first app by using Teams Toolkit on Visual Studio, and some of the FAQ for Teams Toolkit. I think these slides are available in the main slide deck Vesa puts together, so you can go ahead and check the links in the main deck. If you have any questions, I will be available to answer in the chat as well, or I don't know if you have any minutes to answer the questions, but I'll be available both in the chat and here if there's any questions. Thanks, everyone.
Excellent. Excellent, Aisha. Really, really cool stuff. Let's from a timing perspective, let's make sure that we go to build. We're rather early than late with the recordings, but if there's any questions for Aisha, please use the chat as well. And as Aisha said, we'll have in the blog post summary around the community call, we'll have all of the links, of course, listed there. But Bill, I can see you on a call.
So yeah, let me bring up some screens really quick. All right, I believe I am here to talk about search, some of the new usage reports that we've delivered over the last couple of weeks. So I want to kind of be brief, be bright, and be gone. So I'm going to quickly walk you through some of the reports that we've recently introduced as part of our Insights expansion for Microsoft Search. A couple of things to kind of level set on as we think about Microsoft Search. We have made a fundamental shift over the last couple of planning semesters to really emphasize SharePoint, Office.com, and by SharePoint, I mean SharePoint Home, Office.com, and Bing as our primary search canvases. We're starting to talk more and more about those as being our workplace search experiences. So workplace searches to us are those canvases to which you can retrieve an org-scoped set of search results in the results page, meaning, data from not only the walled garden of Microsoft 365, but also any of your connected systems, whether you're using graph connectors or whether you're using our federated developer platform to do query time or index time merging of search results. So I kind of wanted to level set there because I get a lot of questions about usage reports in respect to why do they only show these three canvases? And those canvases are largely our org scoped canvases. So that's really where we emphasize our kind of search insights. So if you saw about 2 weeks ago, we announced a couple of new reports that have come to our search insights and our search and intelligence admin center. So I'm briefly going to kind of walk you through a couple of these here. The first thing that you'll notice that's new is underneath the Insights tab, the first thing you retrieve is what we call our overview page. Our overview page is largely intended for you to have a quick at-a-glance view of search activity, which includes active and engaged users, which is a pretty new function to our Search Insights reports as of recently. So on a day-to-day basis, any cloud platform collects metrics that we call MAU and DAU and WOW. So, your monthly average users, your daily average users, your weekly average users. And we felt that this might be meaningful information to not only kind of, look at for our own purposes, but really bring to our customers. So you kind of get this parity in respect to the same telemetry that we're able to retrieve from search on your end. So if you kind of look here, this is a demo environment, so there's not a lot of meaningful activity. But your search usage reports, at least the new ones that we've introduced, when you flip the little preview toggle at the top of the page, are only available starting from October and moving forward from October. So in this particular case, what we're looking for is a period from October 2022 throughout the course of this month. If you want to look at the older search usage reports, you have to flip that toggle back to the classic search usage reports. So looking in here, you can see we have total number of queries, our monthly active users, which is one, which is me, the most important user in my tenant. And then we have the average result position. You know, where was the average result position, the one that I took action against, and its corresponding click-through rate. So the one thing we try to look at is that result position. That's a good indicator as to how well search is performing in your organization, or otherwise, are people finding what they need? Where are they taking action in that result set? If they're taking action on page 3 of the search results, you've obviously got a problem. And that problem can be addressed in a number of different ways. You could configure a search answer, for example, whether it's a bookmark or a Q&A, depending on how the query is expressed, to promote that authoritative piece of content, that thing that people are looking for most frequently and taking action against. If we kind of move down, we've got a couple of other new reports here. As you can see here, you can look at the number of results that were clicked, in this particular case, 5%. Versus the number of no results versus the abandoned queries. So if you kind of think about this, this is an indicator that search is not very successful in my environment, because 100 searches were performed. However, only 5% of those resulted in some kind of meaningful activity. If we come over to this side, 7% of them didn't return a result at all. But most importantly, 88% abandonment rate, meaning that a user provided a query, they clicked enter, and then they took no action against the search results. They either navigated away from search or they didn't click a result at all. So that's an important kind of metric to look at to determine whether or not your users are able to retrieve relevant items. So you kind of compose your click through as well as your abandon. The other things that we've added are queries by country. So where are your users originating from a search perspective, and by occupation. So from an occupation perspective, we pull this data from Azure Active Directory and we bring that in for you to be able to view. So who's actually using search inside of your organization, not only by regionality, but by occupation, as well as by their department or division. So this gives you insights as to, you know, who should you consider optimizing search for within your organization. And then as we kind of move down here, you can see our active and engaged users. Engaged users are those ones that it's searched at least 5 days during the month. And an active user is one that is searched 1 day throughout that given month. So, you know, your engaged users are the people that are using search most frequently. Those are your gatherers. And then on the other end, you have your hunters that very infrequently use search, but they're still active because they're performing at least one query in the course of a month. As I described earlier, one of the things that we're doing is really emphasizing Office, SharePoint, and Bing as our dominant search canvases, because that's where you retrieve that's where we provide the organizational scope from a search perspective. We do have plans to build on-ramps into Outlook and Teams, so you can search within Teams in the future, you can search within Outlook, and you can retrieve an org scoped result by virtue of an on-ramp that we'll introduce. And then what else is new is connection analytics. So down here, any of those systems that I've connected via a graph connector also now can participate in our insights reports. So as you can see here, we have 30 total queries against our connected system. In this case, we have one connector. That connector is indexed 5.9 million items, and it represents our one active connection. If you want to drill in deeper, you can navigate right into these. So I can navigate right into query analytics. I can look at the most popular search terms. For example, I can look at the top 10 no results and the top 10 abandoned queries. Kind of moving into the user analytics side. Again, I can see my active users, and I have a nice graph as to where they're searching. So in this particular case, as you can see, we've had some active usage, at least initially with Office.com. You know, that usage just kind of shifted towards SharePoint as being the dominant canvas. And as you can see, that trend is also true for Bing. So in this particular case, as you can see, our users are starting to favor the SharePoint start page over Bing or Office.com. So again, this gives you an opportunity to kind of optimize for where your users are actually working, kind of that idea of bringing search to where your users are. If we kind of go through our engaged users, as you can see from a Bing perspective, we don't have any engaged users. Again, the engaged user is the one performing at least 5 queries in a given 30-day span. Our Office users, we've seen a decline in this particular case, which correlates to our very similar to our active users as well as the query analytics. And then as we look at the SharePoint start page, we kind of see, some ebb and flow from a start page perspective. And then the other new report that we've introduced is right down here, which is queries and click-throughs by connections. So in this particular case, again, 30 queries that were returned by virtue of a connector result set. And then we have the total number of items that are indexed by our connector. And we can move down and we can kind of look at our connector and we can drill into some of these data sources to better understand how search is performing inside of the organization. So really what our intent here is from a search perspective is we recognize that search takes time and time is money. So we're trying to continue to expand our reports to take that into account to help you optimize, for the best possible user experience to get people into search, but most importantly, to get them out of search. And that's kind of the intent of search. While we want to get users engaged with search, we also want them out of search as well. So the quicker we can funnel in, the quicker we can funnel out is kind of a key indicator of success inside of the search world. So again, we collect queries from across Office.com, SharePoint, and Bing. And then we got a lot of questions as well as to, okay, well, what's going on with site collections? A lot of our users work within the context of site collections. How do we best represent that here? So the good news is we actually have a Canvas expansion project. So we're going to bring much of this detail to SharePoint sites themselves, as well as being able to better look at activity across individual SharePoint sites inside of Usage Analytics. So we have a whole Canvas expansion project that you'll see kind of manifest over the next couple of weeks, in which you'll be able to have a more granular view of the individual site's performance inside of your organization. But site administrators will also get the richness of reports that you find in the Search and Intelligence Admin Center as well. Kind of moving forward, we're also working on adding some more valuable metrics in regards to time saved per employee. So we can interrogate, the time that they spent on the SERP, the search engine results page, and then look at that and compose that against how quickly did they take activity, and then generate a report for you that's suggestive of how much time people are spending in search. The lower that time, the more savings that your organization can inherit from search. So we're working on some of those reports over the next couple of weeks, and then starting related yet unrelated here in the next week or two for targeted release, just to kind of give you an update on some of the work that we're doing that is a little bit different than this. We're also adding support for custom result types. So today you can create a custom result type using our MRT against connectors or connector result sets. So whether that's an SPO connector or a third-party graph connector, you can create custom result types against that. We're also going to expand that report so you can create more and more custom result types, particularly in the SharePoint Canvas. And then as we kind of look forward, we're doing a ton of incredible work against syntax with Microsoft Search, introducing machine reading comprehension, to which we can perform document summarization in Search itself using natural language processing. As well as adding a new transformer-based generative language model that's based on DeepSpeed IO. That'll be coming to Syntax. We'll have a preview in the upcoming calendar year. So some really exciting work that's on the horizon for those of you that are using SharePoint Syntax, as well as a Tenet speller. So more personalized spelling suggestions based on the words and the phrases that individual users use inside of your organization. So as I mentioned, I kind of wanted to come in, be brief, be bright, be gone. So I will turn it back over to Vesa so he can wrap up the conversation.
Sounds good. Excellent. Thank you, Bill. Really great to have an update on the search side. There's so much cool stuff on the Microsoft Search. It's great to have the updates on those as well. Now, as a last topic, we wanted to talk a bit about the SharePoint framework, which is now you can actually build multi-tab solutions using the Microsoft Teams toolkit. So I'm going to do a live demo on that as well, a bit of an update on the SharePoint framework as well, which, by the way, we kind of intentionally started using more and more SPFX because it's not just about SharePoint, and we're going to touch that again today as well. But SharePoint framework is the tooling. It's the easiest tooling to build your enterprise solutions for Microsoft 365. It has the automatic single sign-on. You don't need to worry about anything. You're just magically authenticated. It has the automatic hosting. Super, super important thing. The reason why automatic hosting is super valuable is that the code, which is running as a SharePoint framework solution, is running at the customer tenant. So there will not be any compliance policy security concerns from a customer side because everything is automatically hosted inside of the customer tenant. So they don't need to grant any applications externally getting access to their application. The code itself, the TypeScript, JavaScript, which is running and accessing customer information, running inside of tenant as well. So really good security boundary as well. Consistent dev experience, and of course using industry standard tooling. So no proprietary APIs or proprietary programming languages which you are using. Now, as part of the SharePoint Framework 1.16 release, which went GA last week, we mentioned that on the latest news line, we actually extended the scope of SharePoint Framework even more. So it is really flexible model. The naming is highly confusing. You are using TypeScript. You can choose to use React, Angular, Vue, whatever client-side development tooling, and then typically use the Microsoft Graph to get access on the APIs and information. And your application can be running in SharePoint, in Microsoft Viva, Microsoft Teams, or now also in Outlook or in the Microsoft 365 app, which is basically the office.com, but there's the renaming happening within the applications, which is a bit of a confusing, but it's Outlook and Office for those who are familiar with those terms. And again, there is for all of these things, these applications and all of the different shapes, there's the automatic single sign-on, there's automatic code hosting available, and you are building with React or with TypeScript, more importantly, not with React. You can use React, you can use Angular, you can use other things as well. We in Microsoft, we use SharePoint Framework to build a lot of the experiences as well for Microsoft Viva, for SharePoint, and so on. So you are using exactly the same tool stack what the engineering is using as well. So we're not just giving you an alternative ways of doing extensibility in Microsoft 365. No, you are using exactly the same tool stack as our engineering is using as well. So it's a future-proven model from that perspective. Now, I will jump on Eduardo's question. You can use Vue.js, you can use Angular, you don't need to use any framework, you can use React. We do provide, by default, a scaffolding or a starting project in React. We do not provide that for Vue or Angular, but you can absolutely associate Angular on Vue or whatever is your chosen JavaScript framework for SharePoint framework to be used. It's really up to you. And we have even tooling and tutorials in place how to get started with that. Now, the Teams Toolkit is one of the tooling to be available to build experiences with SharePoint framework. And of course, as we're using Teams Toolkit, as the name implies, you are then targeting Microsoft Teams. Now, of course, we're looking into doing more alignments in here in the future. So making sure that it's not only for Microsoft Teams, the Teams Toolkit will be probably extended to be more for other applications as well, because in Microsoft 365, it's not just about Teams, it's about the other applications as well. Teams is, of course, super important, but we have other shapes and other extensibility options as well. Now, the Teams Toolkit itself simplifies Microsoft Teams development with SPFX. We're going to do a live demo on that one in a second. SPFX enables the automatic hosting, again, like fifth time of mentioning that, inside of the customer tenant, which is the cool thing here. Behind the scenes, the Microsoft Teams Toolkit is using the SharePoint Framework Yeoman generator. So basically, as we are shipping new versions of SharePoint Framework, it is actually using the command line integrations and automation with SharePoint Framework engineering team to make sure that everything is aligned. There's a really easy F5 debugging experience directly in the Teams Toolkit, which makes it super easy to do these implementations. And starting with Teams Toolkit version 1.4, you can actually build multiple tabs with SPFX Team solutions really, really easily. And we're going to see that one in practice as well. Now, we're doing a further alignment and features and capability alignment with across the teams. So Microsoft Teams Toolkit, VS Code team, and the IDE team, and then the SharePoint Framework team is doing more and more integration discussions and roadmap planning together to make this even better in the future. Now let's have a look on how that looks in practice. So let's go to the demo section of things. And let me start by having a clean solution. So what I've done here in my Visual Studio Code, I included quite a few extensions, but if you look for Teams Toolkit or search for Teams, hello, there we go. We can find the Teams Toolkit in here, and in my case, it's already being installed. That's the easiest way to really, of course, install that in the VS Code. Well, that's the only way to install that in the VS Code to get started. And we can see that the latest version is 1.4.1. Wherever I actually saw that in the second, there we go. And in 4.1, we included this capability, what we're going to show today. Now, when I start using the Teams Toolkit, I'm going to choose create a new Teams application. I can also start from samples, which is really cool. I can go to documentation on how to guides as well. Let me start by Teams Toolkit. I'm going to create a new Teams application. This is a bit of a confusing thing from a terminology perspective, which we're looking into getting adjusted. As we start building Teams tabs using Teams Toolkit with SPFX, you're going to choose the SPFX tab option in here. Now, it says Teams Aware web pages, but they're not actually web pages. They are TypeScript components. So we're looking into adjusting that terminology with the team quite soon, because that's quite misleading. It's not a web page. And even though if it would be a web page, there should be a space between that one, because web page together is not English. It might be Finglish, but it's not English. Anyway, so let me choose that option, and then it's going to ask me what is going to be the name and what is the baseline structure, what we're going to use as a starting point of my solutions. And we do provide 3 of them, which is React, Minimal, and None. Now, this comes back on the questions what Eduardo had. Can we use Angular? Can we use some other tooling? And answer is yes. What we would be doing is that you choose None, and then you associate your that JavaScript client framework to be included in that project. So the React here is just us giving you opinionated structure where we give you a starting point of React. You could just as well actually do None and then associate React to be used there with the different options. So there are multiple options. We do not restrict what is your chosen JavaScript client-side framework. Now, React itself is here an option because we use React internally. So most of the implementations of SharePoint Framework, which engineering is doing, are built using React. So that's why the React is in here, and we provide React-based controls and all of that stuff. Now, let me choose React. Let's call this React Hello World, and it's going to then ask me where I'm going to save the solution. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to do React Hello World Nov22, and it's going to create me the structure in the Teams Toolkit. Now, in my case, I've actually done this in a separate project because when we start debugging and when we start creating the solutions, it actually runs the install command afterwards. So I'm going to save some time because the npm install will take a while. I'm going to close that one, and I'm going to close that one, and then I'm going to jump to an existing solution where the npm install has been already executed. And basically, this is the outcome what you're getting. So let's have a quick look in here and then add the additional tab in place. So what we have here is a Teams Toolkit in place. And as we are using the Teams Toolkit, we get a lot of additional capabilities. Like, for example, we can associate that directly to a tenant for a really easy F5 debugging. I'll show that one in practice. We get also references to start a new application, view samples, do an F5, provision to the cloud. So a lot of these kind of commands, which you would have to remember from a command line, you can directly click in this, and then that will initiate the needed commands and needed operation to make things happen. Add features is an important one as well, because that's the one where we will choose to add an additional tab to the SharePoint Framework solution pretty soon as we start developing this solution. In the future, we are looking into, of course, in SPFX solution case, also to have the Azure functions and all of those scenarios in place in here as well. which are currently in Add Features option if you're building a SaaS hosted solution, but not for SPFX hosted solution, which is a bit of a bummer because it's quite common that you use Azure Functions, even though you would be using SharePoint Framework. Now, all depends on your design and scenarios. So in the solution structure side, if you are familiar with SharePoint Framework, the Teams Toolkit works in a way that it actually encapsulates the SharePoint Framework solution to its own subfolder. So it has its own structures and instructions and configurations on how to do debugging, everything else outside of the SharePoint Framework solution. Behind of the scenes, it's still using Yeoman Generator to automate creation of these assets. So like in this case, we have a solution here and a web page here, which is actually the tab, which is defined to be exposed as a Teams personal application. And that's the first tab which we have added using the Create tab experience. We can also see a few other settings here, which are really cool. So making it super easy to configure. We can easily see the different options and configurations and the metadata settings for the package, which is getting deployed to my tenant. One of the really cool things here is that we're supporting, or Teams Toolkit is supporting two different options. So it's actually supporting a dev and local options in here. So you can actually differentiate, are you deploying a developer side or a local option or other options. So you can differentiate in the settings of the manifest already the text. So you clearly know that, okay, this is the debugging version, this is the developer version, this is production version, which is really, really cool. Now, in my case, a simple scenario, we kind of go to, let's go actually in here. I'm going to do an F5. I already signed in to my developer tenant, which is really, really cool. I can click an F5 here. I don't have to do anything else than that. And it actually starts deployment and packaging. And then it fires the browser in the right status and the right options so that I can sign in to my developer tenant. So making it super, super easy again to start implementing these solutions. Well, it's going to compile, it's going to run the web stack, all of that stuff. So that's going to take a while. And here we go. Now the local host is running. And then we're firing still settings and commands and configuring Webpack. Technically, the Webpack has already been executed within the solution, so we could have skipped that, but it's okay. In this case, we're then signing in to the tenant. We can see that I'm in my developer tenant. We're already signed in. And in here, it's going to then fire my installation of my solution to the developer tenant, and I can add that solution to be as available in the developer tenant. And now I'm running the solution as a Teams Toolkit November 22 demo with the one tab in the page. And of course, the SPFX solution behind of the scenes is showing the basic functionalities. So it's basically pointing out that you're debugging scripts. We can now see behind of the scenes that we are in the context of the Visual Studio Code, so we can actually do debugging directly in Visual Studio Code. And SPFX solution is detecting that we're in the Teams app. So it shows that we're running in Teams, the web part properties, business details, and all of that. And we have a one tab available. The about is always the one which has the solution details. Now, the new thing in 4.1 is the fact that if I close this one, let's shut down the debugging. I can do here, I can click Add Features. And as we are in a SharePoint Framework solution, I can see the options for SharePoint Framework, which is basically adding a new SPFX tab, or then options related on CI/CD workflows. We need to do some documentation improvements in here. But in our case, we're going to choose SPFX tab. Let's give it a name like additional tab, just to make sure that we can easily find that it's available. And that then scaffolds that additional tab to be available within the project. So making sure that it's available. There we go, tab is available. We have a message in here. And if we go to the solution structure, extend to SPFX, we can actually see that we have two web parts available, which are then as these tabs. Well, they could be exposed as personal applications even in Outlook, but that's a separate discussion. That's not a demo of today. So now the cool thing here is that it's fully automatic. So now if I do F5 again, we can do debugging in either one of the tabs. So now as I do F5, everything is automatic. I don't need to do anything. And it fires again my browser. making it super, super easy in TypeScript to do my development, debugging, testing, all of that stuff. And it has the hot reload as well in place. So of course, you don't need to wait for the execution of all of this stuff. So we can do modifications directly in the code, and it has the hot reload in place within things. The reason why it now takes a while is that we did pause the debugging, added a web part, and then again, we started the debugging again. Here we go. We're firing in Teams. We're adding the solution and loading the solution. As the solution has significant modifications, we need to add it again. But now we would be able to, as we're running in the browser, we can now see that we have two different tabs. You can see them both in here, which is really, really cool. Let's load the debug script. We can see the first tab available there, and as I click to the second tab, it is available and getting loaded to other component. And this is the additional tab, which we just added on the code. So making it super, super easy to do modifications. And again, the hot reload works really, really well. So I can actually go, let's see if we can quickly do this. I can go in here, not in there. Let me go to components. Additional tab, let's call this out. Welcome to SharePoint Framework in the call. And now if I do save, and let's go in here. Let's go to the business details and flip the tabs. Now it's compiled, it's refreshed, and hot reload should actually give us an updated message. Oh, there we go. We added that text in place. So now we can do live debugging, live testing of the code, the TypeScript code. We can do modifications, we can adjust things in a matter of seconds. We can see this live on the Microsoft Teams, making it super, super, super easy to do Microsoft Teams development with Teams Toolkit and SPFX. Cool. That's all what I'm going to do in this demo. So much cool stuff to show. We'll come back on the showing the other things and other settings and all of that. But we are a bit of running out of time, so let's actually close up the setup for today. So the recording of the call will be in 24 hours in the Microsoft 365 Community PnP YouTube channel at AKMS M365 Videos. Subscribe that today so you'll know when the new videos are available. Now follow us on Twitter. Twitter is still a thing. At least we do share updates in there. I think a lot of people are still in Twitter. Hopefully that will remain in the future as well. I have a high confidence on that. Hopefully a bit of a messy situation gets clarified there pretty soon. The next Microsoft 365 platform call is on November 29th, so a week from tonight at 8 a.m. Pacific time. And if you're looking into downloading the recurrent invites, go to the AKMS M365 calls. From there, you can download the recurrent invites within your calendar. But that's all we're going to do today. Thank you, Aisha. Thank you, Bill, one more time. Thank you for all of the attendees. Great chat. I'll follow up on any questions on the chat. Was unable to answer them directly live as I was doing the demos as well, but I'll follow up on those afterwards. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the week. And if you're in US, enjoy the few days off in end of the week. Thank you. Bye-bye.